They called him the small-town kid and relegated him to the corners. But his silence hid more than humility. It concealed a brilliant mind. When he finally spoke, arrogance fell of its own weight, and the entire university learned a lesson from the countryside. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this. From his first day at the prestigious School of Agricultural Management at Heartland University, Ethan Miller became the target of barely contained snickers and barely disguised whispers. His calloused hands contrasted with the latest tablets and laptops that his classmates, children of American agribusiness entrepreneurs, handled with carefree familiarity. For them, that quiet young man who wore worn boots, a straw hat, and a checkered shirt was a kind of walking joke, an anachronism. In the 21st century, "Did you see the farm boy?" whispered Richard Anderson, heir to the largest supermarket chain in Chicago, as he watched Ethan sit in the back row of the lecture hall. He's probably never seen a computer in his life. Victoria Foster, whose family controlled 3 avocado-producing estates in California, let out a disdainful laugh. I wonder how he got in here. A charity scholarship, perhaps. No one really knew his name. For all of them, he was simply the farmer, the country boy, or worse yet, the hick. They looked at him as if he were a curiosity, a rare specimen that had sneaked into their privileged world of international travel, luxury cars, and corporate meetings. Professor George Owens, a professor of agricultural economics, entered the classroom with energetic steps and began to talk about the importance of agribusiness in the American economy. During the class, he divided the students into groups for a first exercise presenting hypothetical projects. As expected, no one wanted to include Ethan in their team. "Sorry, we're already full," Danielle Carter, a girl with perfectly straightened hair and manicured nails, told him when he timidly approached her table. Finally, Professor Owens had to assign him to Richard's group, who made no attempt to hide his displeasure. "Look, country boy, we'll take care of everything," Richard snapped when they met. "You just sit there and don't get in our way, okay? If you have to say something during the presentation, just stick to reading what we give you." Ethan nodded silently, his dark eyes observing everything without revealing any emotion. He limited himself to taking notes in a worn notebook, while his classmates animatedly discussed a tropical fruit export project. The day of the presentation arrived. Richard's team presented an elaborate business plan with colorful graphics and English terms. They talked about digital marketing, international expansion, and million-dollar investments. When they finished, they received enthusiastic applause from their classmates. "Excellent presentation," commented Professor Owens, "although I'd like to hear from Mr. Miller, right? I haven't heard him participate." An uncomfortable silence took over the classroom. Richard turned slightly pale. "He didn't prepare anything, Professor," he hastened to say. "In fact, he barely attended the group meetings." The professor looked at Ethan, who remained seated in his place with a calm gaze. "Do you have anything to add, Mr. Miller?" Ethan stood up slowly. His voice when he spoke was surprisingly clear and confident. "I just have one question about the operating costs," he said, pointing to one of the projected graphs. "If you implement a refrigeration system like the one you propose, with those energy costs and considering the transport distances between Florida and the northern border, how do you intend to maintain the profit margin you project? Also, you haven't considered the seasonal fluctuations in production or the export tariffs that the United States has just implemented for tropical fruits from Florida." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard opened and closed his mouth several times, unable to articulate a coherent response. "That's a very pertinent observation," Professor Owens finally intervened, with a gleam of interest in his eyes. "Can anyone answer Mr. Miller's question?" No one could. The project that had seemed so brilliant moments before now revealed its serious deficiencies. Weeks later, the students were assigned to new groups for a practical assignment that consisted of simulating the management of a fictional farm. This time it was Isabella Reynolds, daughter of the owner of a corn mill chain, who was forced to include Ethan in her team. "Look, Miller, so there are no problems," she told him condescendingly. "You'll be in charge of finances. It's just keeping some simple accounts. Do you think you can handle that?" Ethan nodded without protest. A week later, he presented a financial management plan so meticulous, efficient, and innovative that Professor Owens asked permission to use it as an example in future classes. "This is exceptional," he commented, leafing through the report with growing amazement. "He has incorporated rural microfinance techniques that we haven't even covered in class, and his analysis of staggered harvesting to maximize water resource use is brilliant." Isabella and her friends exchanged puzzled looks. How was it possible that this quiet young man, who had been assigned the most basic task just to keep him away from important decisions, had produced something like this? The answer began to emerge one afternoon when Professor Patricia Vega, a specialist in international agricultural trade, was reviewing the files of new students in the faculty lounge. "George," she said to her colleague Owens as she examined a folder, "do you know who this boy Ethan Miller is?" "The quiet boy, the one with the boots," he replied. "He's shown surprising knowledge for someone of his appearance." Patricia let out a small laugh. "His appearance is deceiving. I just realized that he's the son of Frank Miller, the owner of Heartland Exports." George almost spat out his coffee. "The Miller from the Nebraska fields, the ones that provide 60% of durum wheat to Italian pasta processors." Patricia nodded, smiling at her colleague's surprise. "The very same. It seems the boy has been learning the family business since he was 12, but the family has always maintained a low profile. No social media, no public appearances, the old school of American farming." What neither of them knew was that Lucy Harrison, a student passing by, had accidentally overheard the conversation. And news on a university campus travels faster than the wind. The next morning, Ethan entered the classroom as always, silent, dressed simply, with his notebook under his arm. But something had changed. The whispers that followed him were no longer mockery, but intrigue. The looks expressed not disdain, but a new kind of interest. Richard approached him with a smile that was meant to be friendly. "Hey, Ethan, I was thinking, maybe we could grab a coffee after class. I'd like to talk to you about some ideas I have for a project." Ethan looked at him with the same calm expression as always. "Sorry," he replied softly. "Today I have to help the workers with the planting in the university's experimental field." And he went on his way, leaving Richard with the words in his mouth and a confused expression on his face. The rumor about Ethan's true identity spread through the faculty like a plague in the rainy season. Suddenly, those who had previously ignored him now sought to sit near him in classes. Invitations to parties and events began to arrive, always rejected with a kind smile and the same excuse. He had pending work, studies to complete, responsibilities to attend to. The faculty organized a special event with representatives from the national agricultural sector. Among the prominent speakers was Frank Miller, a man of simple appearance but penetrating gaze, dressed in an impeccable button-up shirt and polished boots. No one in the auditorium, except for a few, made the immediate connection with Ethan. "My name is Frank Miller," he began his presentation, "and before talking to you about the challenges of American agricultural exports, I want to thank this institution that has trained generations of professionals, including my son, who is here among you learning humbly." All eyes scanned the auditorium until they found Ethan sitting in a corner, taking notes in his worn notebook. The murmur was immediate and widespread. Isabella Reynolds, sitting 2 rows ahead, turned to look at him with a mixture of astonishment and embarrassment. After the conference, Victoria Foster approached Ethan with a smile that tried to appear natural. "Your father is impressive," she commented. "You never told us you were Frank Miller's son." "You never asked," he replied simply. "Besides, I'm here to learn, not to brag about my family's work. Could we visit your ranch sometime?" she asked, with a sudden interest that didn't go unnoticed by Ethan. "Maybe someday, as part of an academic practice," he answered. "The doors are always open for those who want to learn." The following week, the faculty announced an agricultural innovation contest. Participants had to present projects that would improve productivity in American fields in a sustainable way. Ethan registered without teammates, unlike the majority who formed teams. "Are you really going to participate alone?" Richard asked, him now strangely interested in maintaining a cordial relationship. We could form an unbeatable team if we joined forces. I prefer to present this particular project on my own, replied Ethan. It's something personal. On presentation day, the teams showed impressive innovations: drones for crop monitoring, applications to track pests, computerized irrigation systems. When Ethan's turn came, he went up on stage with a simple model and unadorned slides. My project is called Smart Cornfield, he began. It's an irrigation system that combines ancestral techniques from Native American farmers with low-cost sensor technology. He explained how his maternal grandfather, a farmer from Arizona, had taught him to predict rain cycles by observing the behavior of certain insects and plants. He had taken that traditional knowledge and combined it with humidity sensors that cost a tenth of the available commercial systems. The beauty of the system is not in its sophistication, but in its accessibility, he explained. A small producer from Montana or Oklahoma can implement it without going into debt and increase their yield by up to 40% while reducing water consumption. The jury, composed of professors and entrepreneurs from the sector, was impressed. Professor Owens couldn't contain a proud smile when Ethan's project was unanimously declared the winner. What no one expected was that the next day, representatives from Agritech America, one of the most important companies in the country, would request a private meeting with Ethan. "We want to talk about the possibility of developing your project on a national scale," they told him. "We believe it could revolutionize production in small farmer areas." The news spread quickly. The same students who had previously looked down on him now approached him in the hallways with technical questions, invitations to collaborate, even business proposals. Ethan responded to everyone with the same patience and simplicity, showing no trace of vanity or resentment for the previous treatment. Lucy Harrison, the student who had overheard the professor's conversation, approached him one afternoon while he was studying in the library. "Can I ask you something, Ethan?" she said, sitting across from him. "Of course. Why did you never say who you were? You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble." Ethan closed his book and looked at her with a small smile. "My father taught me that the respect worth having is the one you earn through your actions, not your last name or your money. I came here to learn, not to be treated differently because of my family." Lucy nodded, thoughtful. "That explains why you still dress the same and use that old pickup to come to the university when you could have whatever you wanted." "This hat belonged to my grandfather," he replied, touching the worn straw hat that rested on the table. "And my truck has never broken down on me. Why change them?" Shortly afterward, the faculty selected 3 students for an academic exchange at an experimental farm in Europe. Ethan was one of those chosen, along with Isabella Reynolds and another senior student. During the month they spent in Europe, while Isabella and the other student posted photos on Instagram visiting monuments and restaurants, Ethan spent the nights conversing with local technicians, comparing cultivation methods and taking meticulous notes. He returned with a proposal for collaboration between universities that was sent directly to the American Department of Agriculture for consideration. Upon returning, they found that an unexpected plague had affected part of the national corn production, causing concern in the sector. During a class on agricultural crisis management, the professor asked the students what measures they would consider appropriate. While most proposed drastic solutions based on theoretical information, Ethan raised his hand. "If I may, Professor," he said in his usual respectful tone, "I just returned from our fields in Nebraska, where we faced this same plague 2 weeks ago." The classroom fell silent. Even the professor sat down to listen. "We discovered that a combined treatment of certain beneficial fungi with accelerated crop rotation can contain the spread without the need for aggressive chemicals. I can share the technical details if it's of interest." For the next hour, Ethan patiently and clearly explained the practical methods to face the crisis. The students took notes frantically, and the professor listened attentively, as if he were a colleague instead of a student. At the end of the class, the dean of the faculty, who had been observing from the back of the classroom, approached Ethan. "Mr. Miller, I'd like to propose something to you." Would you consider organizing a practical workshop to share that information with the rest of the students? I think your direct experience would be invaluable. Ethan agreed with a nod. It would be an honor, Dean. My family has always believed that knowledge should be shared, especially in difficult times. The workshop was scheduled for the following week, and, to the surprise of many, not only did students and professors from the faculty attend, but also farmers from nearby areas and representatives of producer associations. After the event, Richard Anderson approached Ethan. His attitude had changed notably since the first days. "Ethan," he said with an unusual seriousness, "I wanted to ask you something. My father has a farm in Kansas that is facing similar problems to those you described. Do you think you could give us some advice?" Ethan looked him in the eyes for a moment, as if evaluating his sincerity. "Of course," he finally replied. "Give me the details and I'll see how I can help." Richard seemed surprised by Ethan's willingness to help him after how he had treated him. "Thank you," he murmured. "Really, thank you." Ethan smiled slightly. "It's nothing. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. What affects one American field affects us all." As he walked away, Lucy, who had observed the scene, approached Ethan. "You know, you've changed many things here," she commented. "Not just the way they see you, but the way many see the countryside and those who come from it." Ethan shrugged. "I'm not looking to change anyone, just to do my job as best I can." "That's precisely what's changing everything," she replied, with a smile. The faculty organized a visit to different producing farms as part of the educational program. To the surprise of many, the Miller Ranch in Nebraska was among the scheduled destinations. On the day of the visit, the students expected to find a traditional farm, perhaps with a certain rustic charm, but nothing extraordinary. What they found left everyone speechless. The Miller Ranch was an impressive operation. More than 12,000 acres of diverse crops, drip irrigation systems controlled by satellite, drones monitoring the state of the plants, soil analysis laboratories, and more than 200 employees working with millimetric precision. "Welcome to our home," Frank, Ethan's father, greeted them, dressed with the same simplicity as his son. "I hope this visit proves instructive for you." During the tour, Victoria Foster approached Ethan discreetly. Why not?" she stammered, unable to formulate the complete question. "Why don't I show off all this?" he completed with a calm smile. "Because it's not mine, Victoria. It's the result of the work of 3 generations of my family and the daily effort of hundreds of people. It's not for me to boast about it." The silence during the rest of the visit was more eloquent than any apology. However, not everyone reacted the same way. A week after the visit, Ethan discovered that some classmates had created a fake profile on social media where they portrayed him as a rich kid playing farmer and made fun of his way of dressing and speaking. "You should respond," Lucy advised, him outraged by such pettiness. "You should expose those behind this." Ethan shook his head. "The time I would spend defending myself, I prefer to use for something productive," he replied. In the next class, the professor asked the students to present a report on business ethics in the agricultural sector. When Ethan's turn came, he projected a single slide with a phrase, "Dignity needs no defense, only constancy." He completed his presentation by talking about how his family had maintained the same values throughout 3 generations: respect for the land, for the workers, and for the community. He didn't mention the mockery or the attacks, but everyone understood the underlying message. Shortly afterward, the faculty welcomed a new visiting professor, Dr. Carmen Vasquez, a specialist in international commodity markets for agriculture. During her first class, after briefly introducing herself, she surprised everyone by addressing Ethan directly. "Mr. Miller, I understand your family has developed a unique system of direct export to Europe. Would you mind sharing with the class some aspects of that model?" Ethan, now accustomed to these situations, stood up and walked to the front of the classroom. For the next hour, he led a discussion on logistical challenges, international certifications, and negotiation strategies with European buyers. His mastery of the subject was so evident that the professor herself occasionally took notes. Impressive, she commented at the end of the class. Mr. Miller, I'm organizing an international congress on sustainable agricultural export in Denver next month. I'd like you to consider presenting your grain traceability project there. The Congress brought together investors, academics, and producers from several countries. Ethan's presentation centered on a system to connect small producers with the European market through blockchain was received with a standing ovation. Upon returning to the faculty, he found a small celebration organized by his classmates. This time, unlike other social events to which he had been invited out of interest, he perceived a genuine sincerity. To Ethan, Isabella Reynolds toasted, raising a glass, who has taught us that true success is not measured by what you have, but by what you contribute. As the semester came to an end, the dean announced that Ethan had been selected as the student representative for the closing speech. The ceremony would be held in the main hall, where everything had begun months ago. On the day of the event, Ethan went up to the podium dressed as always, checkered shirt, worn jeans, and his inseparable boots. The contrast with the formal environment of the ceremony couldn't be greater, but somehow no one found it out of place anymore. I thank my professors for sharing their knowledge, he began, and my classmates for the lessons they have given me, both the easy ones and the difficult ones. He paused and scanned the auditorium with his gaze. It's never about where we come from, but how we decide to grow. The field has taught me more than any classroom, but this place has given me the tools to turn that knowledge into something that can benefit many. That, I believe, is the true privilege of education. The speech touched many hearts, but perhaps none as deeply as Victoria Foster's. After the ceremony, she approached Ethan with wet eyes. I need to tell you something, she said with a trembling voice. I was one of the people who made fun of you the most at the beginning. I behaved horribly and I want to apologize. Ethan looked at her calmly. There's nothing to forgive, he replied. We're all constantly learning. You've taught me what true greatness is, she continued, and it has nothing to do with money or social position. Weeks later, Ethan received an invitation to join the Youth Council of the National Farmers Federation, an honor rarely granted to someone still in training. He accepted with one condition, to be able to continue working directly in the field. Theory without practice is like a seed without soil, he explained when asked why he insisted on maintaining that direct contact with production. The best ideas are born with hands in the earth. 5 years later, the School of Agricultural Management inaugurated a mentoring program with distinguished alumni. The first guest was, naturally, Ethan Miller, now recognized as one of the most important innovators in the sector throughout all of North America. He arrived at the faculty driving the same worn pickup truck, wearing the same boots and the same straw hat. In the auditorium, students, professors, and several of his former classmates awaited him, some of whom now came to him seeking professional advice. The talk was inspiring, full of practical examples and anecdotes from the real field. When it ended, an older lady in the audience raised her hand. Young man, she said in a clear voice, I'm Martha Durham, Lucy's grandmother. Your way of speaking reminds me a lot of my late husband. He also worked in silence, but each day he transformed his small plot into a better world. Ethan smiled with genuine emotion. That's the greatest compliment I could receive, Ma'am, he replied. People like your husband are the true pillars of our America. Before leaving the classroom, the same one where he had once been ignored and looked down upon, Ethan wrote on the board a phrase that summarized his journey. The farmer you laughed at was just busy learning how to feed the country. That night, as he drove back to the family ranch under the starry Nebraska sky, he reflected on the road traveled. The mockery, the snubs, the prejudices, all had been part of a larger learning experience. His phone rang with a message from Lucy. Your story has inspired a whole new generation of students. Grandma can't stop talking about you. Ethan smiled. True success, he thought, wasn't in the awards or recognitions he had accumulated, but in having remained true to his roots while building bridges between two worlds that seemed irreconcilable, the ancestral wisdom of the American countryside and the technological innovation of the 21st century. When he arrived at the ranch, his father was waiting for him on the porch, as always. "How did it go?" asked Frank. "Well," Ethan replied simply, "I think they finally understood the message." "And what is that message, son?" Ethan contemplated the vast fields that stretched before them, where hundreds of families found sustenance thanks to dignified work. "That the true wealth of our land is not in what it produces," he replied, "but in the people who work it with respect and knowledge." Father and son remained silent, observing how the moon illuminated the crops that would feed thousands of people in America and beyond its borders. They needed no more words. Both knew that the story of the young farmer who had transformed the perception of an entire faculty was just the beginning of a much deeper change. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ethan Miller has moved you and perhaps inspired you to look beyond appearances. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special list with equally captivating stories about extraordinary people who transform lives through simplicity and authenticity. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you like this story of the American countryside and its valuable lessons, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of rural and urban life in our deep America. Don't miss our upcoming content about the roots that define us as a nation. We'll be waiting for you in the comments to know what you thought of Ethan's journey.